Welcome to Psalm 9. The Lord abides into the eon. Maybe I might change that because the theme of this, I see of this whole psalm is a judgment as we go through it. There's a lot about judgment. And it begins to the telos, the director, or it could be for the end, which I don't know what that would mean. Telos is an end, or it could be the person that does something. In this case, I put director. That's a hard word here to choose what the best English word would be for. Then hyper, we have the word hyper, something that's over, the kriphion, the private things of the Son, a psalm attributed to David. Now, exactly what the private things of the Son, and what Son is it talking about? And these were added later to explain certain things. I don't know if it did a good job of doing it by putting these titles in there, but they are there. They've been there for a long, long time, thousands of years. I shall make acknowledgement to you, O Lord, with my entire heart. And that is a good thing for us to learn from David, to acknowledge God. When I get up, Lord, you control everything. You are everything that happens in my life and happens in the country that I live in, the family. You are the one that designs the whole thing and determines things, how they're going to happen. We have very little free will. We do have, I believe, free will to either choose or reject God in our lives. But after that, we don't have a whole lot of control over other people in our families, or our lives, or our what's going on in nature and what's going on within our body. Natural occurrences that could strike a person, an automobile accident, fall off of a horse, so forth. I will be glad and exult in you. So being glad and exult in God is one thing. Now, the opposite would be to be morose in life. You're going through a lot of hard times. It's not easy to be glad. A lot of times people will blame God, walk away from him, but not David and not us. We will exult, lift up our hands. I will strum to your name, O highest one, ipsiste. Strumming with a lute of some sort of a stringed instrument along with the psalm. Then we know that David did strum because he came to King Saul. It was sent to Saul because Saul wanted somebody to calm him down, and David would strum and Saul would become a calm person. And he did this for quite a while. So David was an instrumentalist, and the highest one is God, the highest one, not the lowest, but the highest. And God is, now is he up? Is high up? To me, high is up. It's not down. And where God is, pointing is kind of futile because the universe is just vast. But words are all we have to describe it. In the turning of my enemy unto the rear, they shall weaken and be destroyed from your face. So apparently, this is at a time when David was being attacked by other people, enemies, either other countries or people of his family or his other tribes. For you made my case and my cause. You sat upon the throne judging righteousness. And here is the beginning of the judging. It goes almost all the way to verse 8. These are judicial words. You made my case. Crisis comes from that. And my cause. You took up my case, my cause, not for somebody else, against my enemies. And you sat upon the throne judging. Now, where did they see the throne judging? The judges of Israel were in different cities, but yet David saw something, the throne and the one judging righteousness. And so we see this God being a judge. And it'll continue on down here. You reproached ethnicity, nations. So the nations have been reproached by God. How do you determine whether a nation has been reproached by God or it has been uplifted by God? I suppose by how it turns out. The Roman Empire fell with the arrival of Christianity. Now, is that reproaching the Romans? There could be something like that. And the impious one perished, the ones that do not believe in God. The nation that I can think of that had impious ones that had to do with ignoring God or not wanting anything to do with God in my lifetime was the Soviet Union, who made atheism the church, the state religion, and abolished churches. And they were destroyed pretty much. It ceased to exist, and even in my lifetime. You wiped away his name into the eon. That would be the impious one. And into the eon of the eon. So the impious ones, it says, we'll find out, they go to Hades, and their name is going to be wiped away if they're impious, and they die without believing in God. I just had a close friend pass away last week, and he was not a believer in Jesus, but he believed in gods and goddesses. And I think about these people that I've known, and maybe you do in your life, the people that have rejected Jesus and rejected God, and the result of where they go is sort of horrible. It's not a good situation, and his name, that person's name, will be wiped away into the eon. God had a book of life, and wiping the name out of that book is maybe what it's talking about here. The broadswords of the enemy failed unto the end, people against David, and you demolished cities. His memorial was destroyed with noise. The enemy, I would think this is what it's talking about. The enemy, his memorial was destroyed. Noise or action, loudness, things going on that would destroy a person and or a nation, a city, so forth. God has destroyed them with noise. And the Lord abides into the eon. Now, I have eonialists. They call me up, and they don't like why you could the word the Lord abides into the forever, eternally. It could be it into the eon, and people have a hard time with forever and eternal because if you're going to go to Hades, you certainly don't want it to be forever. You want it to come to an end, and to think that God would punish people forever and never comes to an end is a horrible thought. And God, the word is eon for eternal, the eonialist, but God abides into the eon. Now, does he abide only at one period of time? No, the eon. It calls it the eon of the eons. God is of the eon of the eons in other places. So the Lord doesn't come to an end. He prepared his throne for judgment. Now, the throne of God sort of ties sometimes into the tabernacle or the temple, where God is above this propitiation seat, sort of a throne, but in judgment, judgment of who? Well, and he will judge the inhabitable world in righteousness. So it's not just Israel here, the whole inhabitable world. He shall judge peoples with uprightness. Now, what does he judge people? How are people judged? You have to have a law that people can break to have a judgment. And then you have people that judges or so forth. and the two conflict because of various circumstances. For instance, law. The law can be man's law, not God's law. God's law was more or less put into action with Moses on Mount Sinai. He made these laws. But in the New Testament, Jesus fulfilled the things of the law, and the people that are not Jews are not required to follow these laws. The United States, countries, they have different laws. The United States, it's not against the law to have a ham sandwich, but it would be in the Mosaic time. In Israel, it would be against the law, and it's probably against the law in many Muslim countries who do not eat pork. So different governments have different laws. You can have a law in one country, I don't know, smoking marijuana, but if you go to a place like Singapore and you do it, then you can end up being beaten with a rod for doing that. So the laws are all different. They're just all over the world, different laws, and wherever you're at, you're supposed to obey the law. And there are also other laws, or parental laws. A parent tells a child what to do and what not to do. And you could call them rules, I suppose. It's not all written down. Maybe they do write some things down, which you should or you shouldn't do. But parents set down the laws to their children. Marriage have laws of marriage, and they differ in many cultures. In India, they have laws as far as certain types of dowries and what women can and can't do. And if they break these laws, they can be whipped or stoned to death and so forth. Different things can happen to these the women in marriage. And also, there are institutions that have laws. You can be in a union and you have a certain laws in the union that you have to obey or not obey. You have to go along with it. And churches are an institution. In the New Testament, a lot of the rules and the laws are set down by Paul of who can be in the church, and if somebody's doing a certain thing, then they are to be excluded, and go through the New Testament and find all these things. So just a ton of laws. Now, judging. There are different levels of judging also. People can judge. And I have one example here of where it says Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. And at dawn, again he came into the temple, and all the people came to him. And having sat, he taught them. And the scribes and the Pharisees led to him a woman having been overtaken in adultery. And having stood her in the midst, they say to him, Teacher, this woman we found in the very act committing adultery. And in our law, Moses gave charge for such to be stoned. You then, what do you say? But this they said, testing him, that they should have a charge against him. But Jesus, bowing low with the finger, he wrote on the ground. And as they continued asking him, having raised the head, he said to them, the one sinless, climb up here, of you, let him cast the first stone at her. And bowing low again, he wrote on the ground, and probably the sins of each one of the people that brought the woman. And they, having heard, and by their consciences being reproved, went forth one by one, beginning from the older. So the one that was oldest, most sins, and the woman was left behind. Jesus was left behind alone, and the woman being in the midst. And Jesus, having raised the head, and seeing no one except the woman, said to her, Woman, where are they? Those your accusers? Did they not condemn you? Did not one condemn you? And she said, No one, O Lord. And to her Jesus said, Nor I condemn you. Go, and from the present no longer sin. So people judging, we have to be very careful because it's explicit in the New Testament about judging people. If you're judging somebody and you're doing the same thing or something worse, then you're actually more guilty than the other person. If you're judging somebody that's an adulterer, but you're stealing or embezzling from a company, well, you're doing, and then you sit there and judge that person, you're going to be judged at a higher way than somebody that didn't do that. Jesus came not to judge, but he came to deliver people, and I believe that is what we are to do. If somebody is doing something that is against God, well, God is going to take care of the person one way or the other, and am I to judge that person? Well, that is on the personal level. And be very careful on judging people that are doing things that you see that are not supposed to be done. Then it even says if the sinners are doing these things in Paul, then you can go with them and be with them and share the word of God. But now if they're in the church, then an institution is a different story. They judge. And I mentioned a few lessons back about how I went to that church in Canada, and they ask if you're a believer when you walk in and judged you right away if you were a believer or not. And compared to the church I went in Southern California with 10,000 people, and they couldn't possibly do that. But institutions, churches can condemn, and then the nation is a judge. You can have the nation, you have a Supreme Court in the United Nations. The European Union has a judicial system, and I believe there's a world court of sorts. You have all sorts of judges, and they can judge. Now, can they be like, they're set up to judge. I don't believe, are set up to judge as such, except for making a decision. I suppose you could say, well, if somebody was sinning, I don't want to be around them because I don't want to be pulled into what they're doing. You make some sort of a judgment. But the judgment of the nations is way higher than on the personal level. And he continues, and the ones knowing your name hoped upon you. And we hope upon God. For you abandoned not the one seeking after you, O Lord. God has not abandoned me. I abandoned God for a certain period of time, 13 years, when there was a disaster. But God was there, and he did not abandon me. You can't lose your salvation like a billfold would not fall out of your back pocket or a woman out of your purse. You can't lose your or deliverance I like better than salvation. You can't lose it. You can walk away, throw it away if you want, but so forth. But he continues, strum to the Lord, to the one dwelling in Zion. Well, if you're a guitarist, there you go. God's telling you to strum in the imperative. Strum to the one dwelling in Zion. Announce among the nations his practices. Now, I look and I see Israel, and they are, at the time, this is what they were to announce. Announce among the nations his practices. And I look on TV, or I look on the internet, and I look to see if there are any Jews that are teaching the Old Testament. It'd be interesting to see how they would teach the Old Testament if it wasn't some type of an anti-Christian diatribe. But if they're actually teaching the things of God in the Old Testament, you would think that they would have a lot of people doing that. But in Jerusalem right now, last week we had this. We had thousands join the gay pride parade in conservative Jerusalem. Is that what God is talking about as far as what the people are to announce among the nations, his practices? I don't think so. But we see in the future that Israel will be doing the correct thing. It says in Ezekiel 43:4, and the vision of the chariot which I beheld was according to the vision which I beheld upon the river Chebar. And I fell upon my face, and the glory of the Lord entered into the house according to the way of the gate, looking according to the east. And Spirit took me up and brought me into the inner courtyard. And behold, the house was full of glory of the Lord. So now the glory of the Lord comes back at this time in Ezekiel in the future. And Israel will again be doing the things of God, not the things that God has prohibited. Now, I'm not trying to be a gay basher by showing what's happening in Israel, but to me it seems like the place where so many people are supposedly following the laws that they don't, but we don't either, and so again, the judging is an issue there. I suppose I have a problem if somebody is doing something that's would God if it was bad, if they're going to push that on other people, then the whole group of people said, well, everybody should commit adultery, and there should be no marriage. Why do we have marriage? Well, I don't think that's the right thing I want to see being propagated, so I would be against that, and so forth. And there's a lot of people that are torn between the things of God that he says to do and not to do, and then you find, well, some people would say, well, this is Old Testament, and this is, but some of the things are in both the Old and the New, and it just goes on and on. But God is going to restore Israel, and I stood, and behold, there was a voice from out of the house speaking to me, and the man stood next to me, and he said to me, you see, O Son of Man, the place of my throne? So there the throne appears, and maybe the judgment, and the place of the track of my feet, in which my name shall encamp in the midst of the house of Israel. And to the eon, I believe the name is Jesus. And the house of Israel shall not profane any longer my holy name, they and the ones leading them in their harlotry. He calls it harlotry. Porneia, pornography, it comes from that word. And by the murders of the ones leading them in the midst of them, in their putting my threshold among their thresholds, and my doorways next to their doorways. And it goes on and on. And he continues, for the one requiring their blood, he remembered, the one avenging the people that are doing the good things. He's not going to forget the ones that have been sacrificed for doing good, the martyrs. He did not forget the cry of the needy. Show mercy on me, O Lord. The imperative, show mercy on us, O Lord. We deserve your punishment, but show mercy, and we stand in front of the judgment. And God has shown mercy through the person of Jesus Christ. Behold my humiliation from out of my enemies, and I have not any humiliation from my enemies, but apparently many people have, and maybe you have. And lift up, take my cause, Lord, if you are being humiliated because of the enemies around you. O one raising me from out of the gates of death, so that I should publish all your praise at the gates of the daughter of Zion. We will now, the daughter of Zion and the gates, in Ezekiel, that temple and city is not in Jerusalem, and you can go through in the videos I had in the last 10 chapters of Ezekiel, and it'll show my take on it. We will exalt over your deliverance, and that deliverance is salvation in the King James, and the salvation and deliverance through Jesus Christ for us Christians. The nations were struck in corruption, which they produced. So many nations are in corruption, and God takes care of them by bringing people to either destroy them or brings people within to cause havoc in the nation. Their foot was seized by this snare which they hid, people getting caught in their own devices of doing evil. I was watching a video of these two young men went in to rob this store, and somebody started throwing things at them, and they turned to run out, and the one guy shot himself in the leg. And so he got caught in his own snare. This happens many times, people doing sinful things, and bad things happen to them. The Lord is known by executing judgments. There are again judgments. God is the ultimate judge. By the works of his hands, the sinner is seized. So when are they seized? Well, I believe the sinner can repent at any time and come to the Lord and change his manner. But once he's standing in front of the judgment, he's pulled in front of this judge, he's seized, whoever takes him there, and can't get away. And then it makes us an ode. Now it may change a little. Let the sinners be turned to Hades. Wow. Even all the nations forgetting God. And there are nations that have walked away from God, like I mentioned, the Soviet Union. Many people were Christians there. For the poor shall not be forgotten at the end, and the patient of the needy one shall not perish to the end. So again, David goes back to the needy people, the poor people that God is going to take care of. Rise up, O Lord. Let not man be overpowered. Don't let other people overpower your loved ones or us. Let the nations be judged before you. God, again, is the judge of the nations, not only of people's sins. Place, O Lord, a lawgiver over them. Could this be Jesus? Because it says he tends the nations with a rod of iron. Let the nations know that they are men. A lot of people believe that a government nation is the end of all things, that they're going to take care of you socially, social security from birth to death, and medical and everything. But the nations, governments, they're just men, and they make a lot of mistakes, and we see it over and over again in the world today, how nations can make mistakes and pay heavy prices for it. Psalm 10, our next video seminar. The Lord breaks the arm of the wicked. So we'll find out about that if you join us in the 10th Psalm, which I hope you do. And until then, God bless.